The bell above the diner door chimes at 6:47 p.m., and Elena Moretti's breath catches in her throat. She's been waiting tables at Marcus's waterfront diner in New Haven for 14 months. 14 months of greetings in English. Only English. Always English. The rule sits in her chest like a stone, something she agreed to but never wanted to swallow. The man who walks through that door changes everything. He's not tall, but he moves like he's carrying something heavier than his own body. His hands are weathered, the kind of hands that know labor, rope-burned fingers, nails worn down from work that doesn't end at 5 o'clock. His coat is navy, faded at the shoulders. Underneath, a shirt creased from the laundromat, not a dry cleaner. There's a slight limp when he steps forward, his left leg hesitant, like it's asking permission before placing weight. Behind him, a girl. 9 years old maybe. Dark eyes that move quickly around the room, cataloging exits, watching faces. Her hand grips his jacket sleeve with both fists, holding on like the diner might shift beneath them. Her backpack is oversized, nearly dragging on the tiled floor. Inside it, Elena will learn later, are her father's work gloves, a change of clothes, and a photograph her mother took before she stopped existing. This is Salvatore Russo. This is his daughter, Bianca. And neither of them knows that someone has been waiting for this exact moment. From behind the counter, Gordon Hale watches them approach. The diner manager stands with his arms crossed, the posture of a man who's spent years controlling rooms where he has no right to control anything. His suit is pressed sharp enough to cut. His smile, when he arranges his face, looks like something he learned from a corporate training video. Gordon has planned this. Not because he hates Salvatore Russo, he's never met Salvatore Russo. Not because Bianca did something wrong. But because 3 days ago, a corporate inspection form landed on his desk with a note, Customer Experience Consistency. Monitor all staff interactions. Report violations. Gordon read between the lines. He understood the assignment. And Elena, beautiful, quiet, terrified Elena, she became his test subject. She moves through the diner in her sensible black shoes, carrying a pot of coffee that suddenly feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Her apron is spotless because she's careful that way. Her blonde hair is pulled back tight because loose things make her nervous. The name tag reads, Elena, in faded letters. Most customers don't read name tags. Most customers don't see her at all. But Salvatore Russo sees her. And Elena sees him. She's been trying not to think about the village outside Cefalu where her grandmother was born. She's been trying not to think about Sicilian words that live in the back of her throat like secrets. She's been trying to be smaller, quieter, less of everything her grandmother taught her to be proud of. 14 months of silence. 14 months of swallowing words. Elena's hands shake as she approaches their table. Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Be honest, have you eaten today? What did you have? Tell me that, your location, and the time. And if you're new, help me prove something wrong. My mother said drill stories would never reach 10,000 subscribers, but stories like this deserve to be heard. So don't leave without subscribing. It feels empty when you come in and leave without saying a word. Now let's continue. Salvatore pulls out a chair for Bianca. The gesture is automatic, old-fashioned, the kind of thing a man does when he's trying to teach his daughter that gentleness still exists. Bianca sits but doesn't look at the menu. She looks at her father's face, reading him the way children read adults, not for what they say, but for what they're afraid to say. Elena stops at their table. Gordon is watching from the counter. The diner has 17 customers. A couple by the window, holding hands but not talking. A construction worker in the corner booth, tired in the way men get when they've been awake since dawn. 3 truckers playing cards. An elderly woman stirring soup she's not eating. 2 tourists who took a wrong turn and decided to stay. None of them know what's about to happen. None of them know that Elena is about to make a choice that will break the rules, heal a man, and change everything about how one room full of strangers understands what it means to belong. Elena opens her mouth. The words are there. They've been there all along, locked behind teeth and fear and 14 months of being careful. Gordon's eyes narrow. He's waiting. Anticipating. Certain that he knows exactly what this shy waitress will do. But Elena looks at Bianca first. She sees a little girl who's holding on to her father like he's the last solid thing in a world that keeps shifting. And in that moment, something cracks open inside her. Elena leans forward slightly, and the words come out in a voice so soft only they can hear, in a language that was supposed to stay buried, in her grandmother's voice, in her mother's voice, in the voice of every Sicilian woman who was told to be less. Beta pixarita, Sidi stanka, Amiri. Beautiful little one. Are you tired, my love? The room goes very still. Salvatore's face goes white. And Gordon Hale realizes, in the space of a single breath, that he has made a catastrophic mistake. Salvatore's breath stops. Not because he understands every word. Not because the syllables are unfamiliar. But because they sound exactly like home. They sound like a kitchen in a village he hasn't seen in 7 years. They sound like his wife's voice, alive and whole and speaking to their daughter the way she used to whisper goodnight prayers. His hand moves to the table to steady himself. Bianca looks up at her father, waiting for his response. The girl has learned to read silence the way soldiers read maps. She knows when her father is present and when he's disappeared inside himself. Right now, she watches his jaw tighten, his eyes go somewhere far away, somewhere across an ocean she's never crossed. The Sicilian greeting hangs in the air of the diner like something fragile. Elena's face flushes pink. She's already regretting it. Already calculating the cost of those 7 words. Her hands clasp together, white-knuckled, and she takes a small step back as if distance can undo what she's just done. The room notices. A fork pauses halfway to a mouth. The elderly woman with the untouched soup lifts her head. The construction worker glances toward the hostess stand. One of the truckers stops mid-shuffle of his cards. Nothing dramatic. No one gasps or stands up. But the diner's rhythm shifts, the way a body shifts when it feels someone watching. Inside Salvatore's chest, a wall cracks. He's standing in a hospital in Hartford, 3 years ago, and his wife, Maria, is lying on a bed with machines doing the breathing for her. The aneurysm came without warning. One moment she was washing breakfast dishes. The next moment she was gone, and the doctors were asking him to make decisions about machines and life support and how long he wanted to watch someone stop being the person he loved. He'd called her name 12 times. She never answered. And after that, he made a choice. A terrible choice. He decided that if he didn't speak Sicilian, if he didn't sing the songs she taught him, if he made himself smaller and quieter and more American, then maybe the grief would be smaller too. Maybe it would leave him alone. It never did. Bianca reaches across the table and touches his hand. The gesture is small. 9 years old, and she knows her father is drowning. "Dad," she whispers. "Dad, what did she say?" Every other parent in this diner would explain it away. Would say something gentle and move forward. Would protect their child from the weight of inherited sorrow. Salvatore does something different. He opens his mouth. But before sound comes out, before he can translate the greeting or explain where it comes from, the footsteps start. Heavy. Deliberate. The sound of someone walking with purpose across tile floor. Gordon Hale is moving toward them. His face hasn't changed. His expression is still arranged in the shape of customer service. But his body language is different now. There's something territorial in the way he moves between tables, how he positions himself. A man stepping into a situation he's engineered and is now controlling. Elena sees him coming and her body reacts. Her shoulders pull up. Her breath becomes shallow. She's done something against the rules, and she knows punishment is walking across this diner floor right now. The construction worker watches Gordon approach. He sets down his fork. The elderly woman abandons her soup entirely. Even the tourists, the ones who took the wrong turn, they sense it. Something in the air of the diner has changed from warm to dangerous in the time it took for 6 words to be spoken in another language. Bianca squeezes her father's hand tighter. She's learning something her father never wanted her to learn, that love and safety can exist in the same moment, but sometimes other people make you choose between them. Gordon reaches the table. His smile is perfect. Corporate trained. The smile of a man who believes he's in control of everything that happens within these 4 walls. Folks, he says, his voice pitched to carry just far enough. Welcome to Marcus's. I'm Gordon, the manager here. I need to address something that just happened. Elena freezes behind the counter, her eyes down, her hands trembling. Salvatore feels the weight of every eye in the diner shift toward his table. 17 people. 17 witnesses. And he's about to become a problem that needs to be solved. Gordon's hand rests on the back of the empty chair at their table. A gesture that looks casual but feels like ownership. Like he's claiming this moment, this conversation, this man and his daughter. We have a policy here, Gordon continues, his voice smooth as oil. English only. It's part of our commitment to a consistent customer experience. I'm sure you understand. He's looking at Salvatore now. And Salvatore understands immediately that this isn't about service. This isn't about language. This is about something else entirely, something about power, about who gets to decide what belongs in a room and what doesn't. Bianca looks at her father, waiting to see how he'll respond. Elena stands motionless, tears beginning to build at the corner of her eyes, because she knows what she's done. And in that suspended moment, that pause before anything is said, every person in the diner is leaning forward, waiting to see how a grieving man will handle a corporate manager who just told him that his language, his culture, his wife's voice doesn't belong here. What happens next will reshape this entire room. Gordon leans in closer. His voice drops, but only slightly, low enough to sound private, loud enough that tables within 10 feet can hear every word. This is a calculated move. A man who understands that public humiliation is more effective than quiet correction. I'm sure you understand, he repeats, and the repetition itself is a weapon. Our customers expect a certain standard. When staff start speaking foreign languages, it makes people uncomfortable. It sends the wrong message about who we are as an establishment. Salvatore's jaw clenches. He's heard this before. Not in this diner, but in the looks people give when they hear him on the phone speaking Sicilian. In the way his boss at the longshoreman's yard used to imitate his accent before he learned to keep his mouth shut. In the silence of his own home, where he stopped singing to his daughter because he was afraid his accent would mark her as other. Sir, Gordon continues, and now he's performative, speaking for the room, not the man. We have a diverse customer base. We can't have staff making people feel like they're in a foreign country. It's unprofessional. Elena's face has gone completely white. She's moved to the side counter, pretending to organize menus, but her hands are shaking so badly that one falls to the floor. She doesn't pick it up. She just stands there, small and silent, bearing the weight of words she didn't know would explode like this. Bianca tugs on her father's sleeve. Daddy, she whispers, her voice small enough that only he can hear. Why is he mad at the lady? What did she do wrong? The question lands like a grenade. Because Bianca has just articulated the thing that everyone in the diner suddenly understands. Elena didn't do anything wrong. She spoke a language. She acknowledged a child. She moved from silence into grace, and a man in a pressed suit has decided that grace is a violation. Salvatore doesn't answer his daughter immediately. Instead, he looks at Gordon with an expression that's changed. The grief is still there, but underneath it now is something sharper. Something a man acquires when he spent 3 years learning how to survive loss while also surviving a system that tells him his loss doesn't matter, his language doesn't matter, his daughter doesn't matter. Let me be clear, Gordon says, and he's straightening up now, positioning himself as authority. If this happens again, we'll need to have a conversation about her employment. I'm sure you don't want to be responsible for someone losing their job because you decided to speak a foreign language in my establishment. The threat is direct. He's not speaking to Salvatore anymore. He's speaking through Salvatore, making sure everyone understands the hierarchy. Elena, watching this unfold, understands it most of all. The cost of her 7 words might be her job. Her paycheck. Her ability to pay rent on the apartment she shares with a roommate in a neighborhood where everyone else speaks Spanish or Mandarin or Arabic, and somehow that's acceptable, but Sicilian, Old World, grandmother's tongue, carried in her bones, that's the line. Salvatore stands up. The movement is slow. Deliberate. A man who's learned that violence lives in speed, so he moves carefully. His chair scrapes against the tile floor, and the sound carries across the entire diner. Everyone stops pretending not to watch. My wife, Salvatore says, and his voice is very quiet, used to say that exact sentence to our daughter. The words just sit there. Gordon's face shows confusion first, then a flicker of something else, annoyance, maybe. Like Salvatore has missed the point. Before she died, Salvatore continues, and the word died lands heavy in the diner like a suitcase full of stones. 3 years ago. Brain aneurysm. She was 34 years old. A woman near the window puts down her fork. The construction worker closes his eyes. My daughter, Salvatore says, looking directly at Bianca now, hasn't heard her mother's voice in 3 years. Not in any language. Not in English, not in Sicilian, not in the songs my wife used to sing. He turns back to Gordon. And the first time someone speaks to her in her mother's language since her mother died, you tell me it's unprofessional. Gordon's face hardens. He's not used to being challenged. Not in his own diner. Not in front of witnesses. Sir, I understand you've experienced loss, he says, and the words are poison dressed as sympathy. But that doesn't change our policies. We have rules for a reason. Rules, Salvatore repeats. He says the word like he's tasting something rotten. Bianca is watching her father now with an expression that breaks your heart, because she's seeing him become something other than the man who braids her hair and makes her lunch. She's seeing him become angry. She's seeing him fight back. Elena still hasn't moved. The entire diner is suspended in that moment where something is about to happen and everyone knows it but no one can predict which direction it will go. Your rule, Salvatore says slowly, is that people can only exist in one language in this room. That a man can't speak to his daughter in the language her dead mother spoke. That a waitress, who was just trying to be kind, has to be punished for showing humanity. He steps closer to Gordon. Not threatening. Not violent. But close enough that Gordon has to make a choice about whether to stand his ground or step back. You want to know what's unprofessional? Salvatore asks. Making a child watch a stranger humiliate someone for speaking. That's what's unprofessional. The diner goes absolutely silent. No forks. No cards. No breathing sounds. Just 17 people watching a man stand up to a system that's been designed to make him small. And Gordon realizes, in that silence, that he's lost control of this room. But he's not done fighting. Salvatore doesn't raise his voice. This is the thing people don't understand about real anger. It doesn't shout. It gets quieter. It gets heavier. It settles into a man's bones and makes him dangerous in ways that volume never could. 3 years, he says, still looking at Gordon. 3 years I've been teaching my daughter that it's safer to be quiet. That being Sicilian is something to apologize for. That her mother's voice is something to forget. He sits back down. But the diner doesn't relax. The tension doesn't ease. If anything, it deepens, because now everyone understands they're in the presence of a man's breaking point, and they're watching to see whether he'll break. Bianca reaches across the table and holds her father's hand. She's 9 years old, and she understands something that took Salvatore 3 years to learn, that grief isn't something you survive by making yourself smaller. It's something that eats you alive from the inside if you don't let it out. Gordon hasn't moved. He's still standing there, still positioned as authority, but his hand has dropped from the chair. There's something in Salvatore's words that has landed somewhere underneath his corporate training, somewhere he wasn't expecting to be touched. You want to know why I stopped speaking Sicilian to her? Salvatore asks, and now he's talking to the entire diner, not just Gordon. Because after Maria died, I couldn't. Every word was like swallowing glass. Every sentence my wife used to sing felt like choosing to suffer. So I decided that if I stopped speaking it, if I made myself American enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, maybe my daughter wouldn't hurt the way I hurt. He pauses. Takes a breath that sounds like it costs him something. 14 months ago, he continues, my boss at the yard asked me to work a double 16-hour shift. I said yes because saying no means less money, and less money means I can't pay for her therapy. Dr. Patterson comes twice a month to help Bianca process what it means to have a dead mother. Insurance doesn't cover grief counseling for children. No one in the diner moves. I picked her up from my sister's apartment at midnight. And she asked me, his voice cracks slightly, she asked me what language mommy used to speak when she was happy. And I realized I'd never told her. I'd erased it. I'd tried to erase her mother by erasing the language her mother loved. Gordon's face has changed. Something in his expression has shifted from dominance to discomfort. He's hearing something he didn't expect to hear. He's being forced to recognize that Salvatore Russo isn't just a customer making trouble. He's a man drowning, and Gordon has just pushed him under the water. My wife worked as a nurse, Salvatore says. 12-hour shifts. She'd come home with her feet bleeding, her back screaming, her voice hoarse from talking to patients all day. And the first thing she'd do is sit with Bianca and speak to her in Sicilian. It was the only time she was soft. The only time she wasn't problem-solving or managing someone else's crisis. It was her language with her daughter. Bianca's eyes are wet now. She hasn't let go of her father's hand. Elena is crying silently behind the counter, her shoulders shaking, because she understands perfectly, what it means to have a language taken from you. What it costs to suppress the voice of someone you loved. When Maria had the aneurysm, Salvatore continues, I was at work. I got the call while I was moving cargo on the dock. By the time I got to the hospital, she was already on life support. And the last thing I said to her, the last conversation we had, was in English. I was too panicked to remember the Sicilian. I was too American. Too efficient. Too focused on the machines and the doctors and the logistics of her dying. He looks directly at his daughter. I didn't get to say goodbye in her language, he says. And I promised myself I'd never put Bianca through that. I'd never let her lose something that precious because I was afraid it would hurt too much. Bianca squeezes his hand harder. But I was wrong, Salvatore says. I was trying to protect her by making her small. And that's the opposite of what Maria would have wanted. Maria would have wanted her to be brave. To speak. To remember. Gordon is still standing there. His corporate posture has dissolved. He's just a man now, watching another man tell the truth about loss, and it's cracking something open inside him that he didn't know was cracked. Bianca does something that surprises everyone. She stands up from her chair. She's wearing a blue sweater with a small hole in the collar where she picked at it during anxiety. Her shoes are mismatched, one from last year, one from this year, because she's growing faster than Salvatore can keep up with. Her hair has a clip from the dollar store trying to hold back curls that are stubborn and wild, exactly like her mother's were. And she asks, in a small voice that carries across the entire silent diner. Daddy, what's something Mommy used to say in Sicilian? The question hangs in the air. Salvatore looks at his daughter, and for the first time since Maria died, he doesn't look away from the pain. He looks directly into it. And he answers her, not in English, but in Sicilian. In the language his wife sang. In the voice of his mother, and his mother's mother, and generations of women who survived loss by speaking it out loud. The diner holds its breath. Gordon realizes, in that moment, that he's been standing in the presence of something sacred, and he's been trying to erase it with policy language and corporate rules. And everything is about to change. The Sicilian words come out broken and imperfect. Not like poetry. Not like song. Like a man learning to speak his own language again after years of silence. Like someone who's forgotten how to breathe and is remembering it through pure desperation. Ti voglio bene, piccolo cuore. Siamo sempre assieme, asterisk. I love you, little heart. We are always together. The words are Maria's. The exact phrase she whispered to Bianca every night before sleep. Words Salvatore thought he'd buried so deep they'd never surface again. But they're there, in his mouth, in his voice, and they're changing the air in the diner in ways that no one can ignore. Bianca starts crying. Not the quiet tears from before. Real tears. The kind that come from a 9-year-old who's just heard her dead mother's voice again, carried in her father's throat, alive and present and real. And that's when the diner turns. It doesn't happen with applause or dramatic gestures. It happens quietly, the way a river changes direction when you remove one stone from the current. The woman by the window who put down her fork now stands up. She's maybe 60 years old, with silver hair and the kind of face that's lived through something hard. She doesn't say anything. She just stands there, and in standing, she signals something to the room. She signals, this matters. This is worth standing for. The construction worker follows. Then one of the truckers. Then another. Not in a coordinated way. Not as a mob. Just individually, quietly, one person at a time, standing becomes a statement. Standing becomes a choice about whose side they're on. Gordon sees it happening. He can feel the room shifting beneath him like a ship changing course without his permission. The customers he believed he controlled, the people who came to his diner and followed his rules and tipped adequately and caused no problems, they're abandoning the hierarchy he's constructed. Elena, still behind the counter, covers her mouth with her hands. She's watching a shy waitress's small act of courage expand into something larger. She's watching a man's grief become stronger than a corporation's indifference. She's watching a child become the most powerful person in the room just by being brave enough to ask a question. Salvatore's voice steadies as he speaks to his daughter. He tells her about Maria. About how her mother used to hum in the kitchen while making pasta. How she'd spin Bianca around until she was dizzy and laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. How she'd speak Sicilian not because it was practical, but because it was true. Because it was home. He tells her things he's been too afraid to say for 3 years. And with each sentence, more people stand. The elderly woman who abandoned her soup stands. The tourists who took the wrong turn and stayed stand. The woman with her partner stands. Even a man in the back booth, someone who hasn't been visible until now, stands, and when he does, people turn to look at him because he has a military bearing, and his uniform, even though he's not wearing one, is visible in the way he holds himself. Gordon tries to reassert control. This is inappropriate, he says, but his voice has lost its certainty. It sounds small now. It sounds like a man trying to dam a river with his bare hands. Salvatore doesn't acknowledge him. He's speaking directly to Bianca now, and everyone else has become secondary. This is between a father and a daughter and a woman who died, and the entire diner is bearing witness to something that feels sacred in a room that's supposed to be selling hamburgers and coffee. Your mother would have wanted you to speak, Salvatore says. She would have wanted you to be loud. To be proud. To never apologize for who you are. Bianca nods, tears streaming down her face. And then she speaks. Not in English. Not at first. She says something in Sicilian, the words fractured and uncertain because she's only heard them in fragments, only caught them in echoes of her father's voice and her grandmother's voice, and now, for the first time, she's brave enough to try them herself. It's a single sentence. Asterisk mi manchi, mama, asterisk. I miss you, mom. The diner goes completely silent. Not the silence of shock. The silence of reverence. The silence of people witnessing something real in a world that usually only offers performance. Gordon's hand has dropped to his side. He's looking at this child, 9 years old, wearing mismatched shoes and a dollar store clip, and he's recognizing something he hasn't allowed himself to recognize in a long time. He's recognizing that he's on the wrong side of this moment. That his policies and his procedures and his desire to control everything has put him in direct opposition to grief, to love, to a father trying to teach his daughter how to survive loss without erasing the person they lost. And then the man in the navy bearing, the one who stood last, he does something unexpected. He steps forward, and in a voice that carries authority born from actual authority, not corporate authority, he says, "Let them speak." And in that moment, Gordon realizes he's made a catastrophic error. He's built his entire career on controlling rooms, and he's just watched a room choose to be uncontrollable. The diner is no longer his. It belongs to Salvatore and Bianca and Elena and a room full of strangers who've just decided that some things matter more than policy. And Gordon has no idea how to survive what comes next. Gordon hears the Sicilian and something shatters inside his chest. Not the words themselves. He doesn't speak Sicilian. But the sound of it, the rhythm, the musicality, the way it carries something ancient and tender, it triggers a memory he spent 30 years trying to bury. His mother. Rosa Hale. Before she was Rosa Hale. Before she married his father and became American and learned to be small and quiet and ashamed. She was Rosa Battaglia, and she spoke like Salvatore speaks, not because it was practical, but because it was the only language her heart understood. When Gordon was 7 years old, she sang him lullabies in Sicilian. When he was 10, his father told her to stop. "We're American now," he'd said. "We don't need that old-world nonsense." And his mother, compliant, loving, trying to make her husband happy, she stopped. She stopped singing. She stopped speaking Sicilian to Gordon's little sister. She stopped being the version of herself that was most alive. By the time Gordon turned 18, he barely recognized the language. By the time she died, pneumonia, at 53, working 2 jobs because his father had left her for a younger woman, Gordon had already become someone who laughed at accents. Someone who corrected people's English. Someone who built his entire identity on not being like her. Someone who'd become his father. Now, in this diner, he's watching a man speak the language his mother gave up. He's watching a child say goodbye to her dead mother in words that sound exactly like the words his mother used to whisper. And he realizes, with a clarity that feels like drowning, that he's spent his entire adult life becoming the person who silenced her. That's inappropriate, Gordon says, but the words come out wrong. They sound desperate now. They sound like a man losing something he didn't know he'd already lost. The Navy veteran doesn't move. Everyone else remains standing. Gordon's face is flushed, and it's not anger anymore. It's panic. It's the panic of a man who's just seen himself reflected in the moment he's tried to destroy. He does what he's always done when confronted with emotions he can't control. He lashes out. "This is a professional establishment," he says, louder now, addressing the whole diner. "Not a therapy session. Not a forum for," he stops, searching for words that won't sound as cruel as he feels them sounding, "for personal situations to be broadcast." A woman in the middle of the room, the one with her partner, shakes her head. "You're not professional," she says quietly. "You're cruel. There's a difference." The words land like a verdict. More people nod. Some audibly. The elderly woman speaks up, her voice carrying the weight of someone who survived enough to recognize oppression when she sees it. My parents came from Puerto Rico, she says. They were told the same thing. That Spanish was inappropriate. That they should be grateful to be American enough to forget where they came from. She points at Bianca. This child is grieving. And you're weaponizing policy against her grief. Gordon feels the room collapse around him. This is the moment where he could apologize. Where he could recognize what he's doing and stop. Where he could choose to be better than his father was to his mother. Instead, he chooses to defend himself. She has to follow the rules, he says, gesturing toward Elena. Everyone else here follows them. Why should she be special? Elena flinches. She's been waiting for this, for the moment when her small act of kindness comes back to hurt her. She's prepared for the consequences. But hearing him frame it as her fault, hearing him suggest she's the problem, breaks something in her that she thought was already broken enough. Salvatore stands. He's not angry anymore. He's something quieter. Something more dangerous. He's a man protecting someone, and his eyes are fixed on Gordon with a clarity that says, "You've crossed a line, and now you have to answer for it." She followed the rule that matters, Salvatore says. The rule that says you speak to human beings with kindness. The rule that says you don't erase people's grief for your comfort. The Navy veteran steps forward. "Son," he says to Gordon, and the word son carries weight, carries authority, carries disappointment, carries the voice of every person who's ever had to tell someone the truth about themselves. You need to step back from this situation before you do more damage. Gordon's hands are shaking. He can feel his carefully constructed world collapsing. He can feel the hierarchy he's built being dismantled by people who've decided that compassion matters more than rules. And underneath all of it, he can hear his mother's voice. He can hear her singing in Sicilian. He can hear the version of himself that he killed when he decided to become his father. He looks at Bianca. She's holding her father's hand, her eyes swollen from crying, her whole small body trembling. And he sees his little sister. He sees his mother. He sees every person who was silenced because someone decided they weren't important enough to listen to. Gordon turns and walks away from the table. He doesn't run. He doesn't storm. He just walks, moving through the diner like a man who's just realized that everything he built was designed to keep out the people he loved most. He disappears into the back office. And the diner, for the first time that evening, breathes. The diner settles into a different kind of silence. Not the silence of tension. Not the silence of conflict waiting to explode. But the silence that comes after something fundamental has shifted. The silence where people sit with what they've witnessed and understand that they'll carry it with them long after they leave this place. Salvatore and Bianca sit at their table. The food hasn't arrived yet. It doesn't matter anymore. They're not hungry for food. Around them, the other customers slowly sit back down. The woman by the window returns to her untouched coffee and stares at it like it might contain answers. The construction worker pulls out his phone and texts someone, his wife, maybe, or his daughter, because what he just witnessed has reminded him that there are things more important than work. The elderly woman picks up her spoon and doesn't eat, just holds it, grounded by the weight of it. Elena emerges from behind the counter. She approaches Salvatore and Bianca slowly, cautiously, like she's afraid they might disappear if she moves too quickly. "I'm sorry," she whispers. She says it 3 times before Salvatore responds. "Don't apologize," he says, and his voice is gentle now. The sharpness from before has softened into something more human. "You gave her a gift. You gave her back her mother." Elena's eyes fill with tears. "My grandmother," she says, "she used to say that speaking Sicilian was like carrying stones. That every word we said in our own language was weight. But she also said it was worth carrying." Elena pauses, collecting herself. "That speaking the language was how we stayed connected to people we loved. How we proved they'd existed. Bianca looks up at Elena. Can you teach me more, she asks. The question is simple. It's also everything. Elena nods, unable to speak. Salvatore watches his daughter make this choice, and something in his chest loosens. For 3 years, he's been trying to protect her by making her silent. And in one evening, she's taught him that the only real protection is truth. The only real inheritance is honesty about where you come from. But he also knows that this moment, as beautiful as it is, carries responsibility. He takes Bianca's hand. Learning Sicilian, he says carefully, it's not just words. It's your mother. It's your grandmother. It's generations of women who survived by being strong and speaking up even when people told them to be quiet. He looks at his daughter directly. When you speak Sicilian, he continues, you're speaking for people who can't speak anymore. You're carrying their voices. That's not a burden. But it is a responsibility. Bianca nods seriously, understanding more than her 9 years would suggest she should. I want to carry them, she says. Salvatore's eyes fill. He pulls his daughter close, and for the first time in 3 years, he lets himself cry in front of her. Not hiding in the shower. Not silently in the car. Here, in a diner, in front of strangers who've decided that his grief matters. Around them, people don't look away. They honor his tears by witnessing them. By not pretending they didn't happen. Elena sits down at their table, uninvited but welcomed. Your mother, she says to Bianca, she sounds like she was brave. She was, Bianca says. And she was soft too. Daddy says she would come home from the hospital with her feet hurting so much she could barely walk, but the first thing she'd do is ask me about my day. Salvatore adds, she was a nurse. She spent her days taking care of people who were scared and in pain. And then she'd come home and take care of us the same way. Like we were all equally deserving of her attention. Elena listens like this is sacred information. Because it is. The Navy veteran walks over to their table. My daughter, he says, she speaks 3 languages. English, Spanish, and Tagalog, her mother's language. When she was 9, she asked me why I didn't speak Tagalog. And I realized I'd spent so much time trying to be American that I'd missed the chance to teach her about her roots. He pauses. Don't make that mistake. Teach her everything. He places a hand on Salvatore's shoulder, a gesture that carries respect between men who understand grief. The woman by the window stands and approaches their table. I'm sorry for what happened, she says. But I'm grateful you stood up. I'm grateful your daughter is brave enough to ask for what she needs. One by one, people come to the table. Not to intrude. To honor. To bear witness to the choice that was made in this diner. To acknowledge that something real happened here. The elderly woman brings a piece of paper and a pen. Write down some of the phrases, she says to Salvatore. The ones your wife taught you. My granddaughter, she's learning Italian. Maybe she can pick up Sicilian too. Salvatore writes, *Ti voglio bene. Siamo famiglia. Non ti lascerò mai, **. I love you. We are family. I will never leave you. He hands the paper to the woman, and in doing so, he's making a choice. He's deciding that his grief, his language, his history is worth sharing. That keeping Maria's voice alive is more important than protecting himself from the pain of remembering her. Bianca squeezes his hand. Daddy, she says, will you tell me a story? About mommy? In Sicilian? Salvatore looks at his daughter. He could say no. He could say they should wait until they're home, in private, where it's safe. Where his pain won't spill out in front of strangers. Instead, he begins to speak. And his daughter listens. And everyone in the diner who's still sitting there leans in, drawn to something they don't understand but recognize as truth. Gordon sits in the back office for a long time. The office is small, desk, filing cabinet, a single window that looks out onto the parking lot. Nothing personal. No photos of family. No memories on the walls. Just a space that belongs to no one because it's been designed to contain only efficiency. He stares at his hands. They're his father's hands. Same shape. Same structure. But his father used those hands to erase people. To silence them. To build a life on top of the bodies of everyone he convinced to be smaller. Gordon has been doing the same thing. For 15 years, he's been running restaurants. Building hierarchies. Installing rules. Creating systems where people either conform or disappear. And he's told himself it was professionalism. That it was standards. That it was protection. But sitting here, in this empty office, he realizes the truth is simpler and more devastating. He's been afraid. Afraid that if he let people speak their own languages, dress their own ways, grieve their own losses, if he let any of that exist in his spaces, then somehow his own carefully constructed identity would collapse. That he'd have to face the person he'd become by becoming his father. There's a knock on the door. Elena enters without waiting for permission. She's still wearing her apron. Her hands are still shaking. But something has changed in her posture. She's standing taller. She's looking Gordon directly in the eye instead of at the ground. "I quit," she says. The words are simple and complete. Gordon starts to respond, to offer her more money or better shifts or anything that might keep her because now, suddenly, he needs her to stay. He needs to prove to himself that he's not his father. That he can change. But Elena isn't finished. "I quit," she continues, "because I deserve to work somewhere that doesn't require me to erase myself. Somewhere my language isn't a violation. Somewhere a man can grieve in peace without being told his daughter's pain is unprofessional." She places her apron on his desk. "My grandmother spent her whole life being quiet," Elena says. "And I watched it kill her. I watched her become smaller and smaller until she disappeared. And I'm not doing that. Not anymore." She turns to leave. "Elena," Gordon says, and his voice breaks on her name. "I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." She pauses at the door but doesn't turn around. "Being sorry doesn't fix anything," she says. "Changing does. So change." Then she's gone. Gordon sits in the silence of the back office and realizes that she's right. Sorry is just a word. Change is a life. He pulls open his desk drawer and finds the corporate directive that started this whole thing. The memo about customer experience consistency and monitoring staff interactions. He reads it again, and he understands what it really means. It means, make sure everyone fits into a narrow box so no one has to feel uncomfortable. It means, erase the parts of people that make you confront your own erasure. He picks up the phone. Regional management answers on the third ring. "This is Gordon Hale at Marcus's New Haven location," he says. "I'm rescinding the English-only policy effective immediately. I'm also requesting a meeting with corporate about diversity and inclusion standards. We need to rebuild how we understand professionalism." There's silence on the other end. "Gordon," the regional manager says carefully, "this is very sudden." "A man taught me something tonight," Gordon responds. "He taught me that policy without compassion is just cruelty with paperwork. I'm not interested in that anymore." He hangs up. The diner floor manager, a woman named Tanya who's worked here for 7 years and has never said a word against his authority, appears in the doorway. "There's a problem," she says. "What is it?" Gordon asks, preparing himself for more fallout. "Elena's been asked to stay," Tanya says. "By all the customers still sitting out there. They're asking that she keep her job. They're saying that if she leaves, they're not coming back." Gordon stands. He walks out of the office and back into the diner. It's changed. The lights seem brighter. The space seems larger. Salvatore and Bianca are still at their table, Salvatore speaking softly in Sicilian while his daughter listens with the concentration of someone receiving the most important education of her life. Elena is standing nearby, and the woman by the window, the 60-year-old with silver hair, is writing down phrases in a small notebook. The Navy veteran is talking to the construction worker about his own children, about how he wishes he'd taught them more about where they came from. The elderly woman is on her phone, talking to her granddaughter about Sicilian lessons. The diner has become something different. It's become a place where people are allowed to be themselves. Gordon approaches the table slowly. "Elena," he says, and he means it with a depth that surprises even himself, "I'd like you to stay. At full pay. And I'd like to remove the English-only policy. I'd like this to be a place where people can speak and grieve and remember in whatever language lets them be true." Elena looks at him for a long moment. Then she nods. "I'll stay," she says. "But things have to change. Real change. Not just words." "I know," Gordon says. And for the first time in years, he means something completely. Salvatore teaches Bianca how to say her mother's name. "Maria," he says, rolling the R the way his wife used to roll it, like love itself has a sound. "Maria," Bianca repeats, and the word comes out hesitant at first, then stronger, then like she owns it. Like she's reclaiming something that was taken from her. They sit in the booth, the food now arriving, burgers and fries, milkshakes that sweat condensation onto the table. But neither of them eats much. They're too busy speaking. Too busy recovering something that was lost. Salvatore teaches her how to say, "I miss you, Mama." He teaches her, "You are brave." He teaches her, "We are Sicilian, and we are strong." Each phrase is a small key, unlocking a door that was locked 3 years ago. Elena watches from across the diner. She's carrying a pot of coffee, but she moves slowly, deliberately, not wanting to interrupt but wanting to witness. Because what's happening at this table is sacred to her. It's her grandmother's voice. It's her own voice, finally allowed to exist. The woman by the window approaches the counter where Elena is restocking napkins. "Your grandmother," the woman says, "was she from Sicily?" "Cefalu," Elena says. "A village outside of Cefalu. She came over in 1952 with nothing but a bag of clothes and a silver cross my great-grandmother gave her. My parents came from Puerto Rico the same way," the woman says. 1968, they were told to speak English or get out. By the time I was born, they'd forgotten how to speak Spanish. And I grew up in a house where I couldn't communicate with my own grandparents." Elena listens. "When I saw you speak to that little girl," the woman continues, "I remembered something. I remembered my mother singing in Spanish when she thought no one could hear. And I realized, we don't have to keep passing down the silence. We can break that cycle." She hands Elena a piece of paper with her phone number. "My granddaughter," she says. "Teach her Spanish. Teach her to be loud about who she is. And maybe teach her some Sicilian too, because language is language, and it all means the same thing, I was here. My people were here. And we matter." Elena takes the number like it's precious. Because it is. Around the diner, small conversations are happening. The construction worker is telling the Navy veteran about how his father was Irish and how he never taught him Irish because he was ashamed. The Navy veteran is nodding, sharing his own story about his mother's Tagalog, about how silence can feel like love when you're taught that erasure is protection. The tourists, the ones who took the wrong turn and stayed, they're talking to the elderly woman about her granddaughter, about starting a language exchange program in her neighborhood. The diner has shifted. It's no longer a place where people come to eat and leave. It's become a place where people come to remember. To speak. To refuse the silence that was asked of them. Gordon emerges from the back office. He watches all of this, the conversations, the connections, the small revolution that's happening in his establishment, and something settles in his chest. Not pride. Not exactly. But recognition. Recognition that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is get out of the way. Is stop trying to control everything and let people be human. He approaches the table where Salvatore and Bianca are sitting. I owe you both an apology, he says. A real one. Not a corporate one. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I'm sorry. Bianca looks at her father, then back at Gordon. Mommy would have said everyone deserves a second chance, Bianca says. The words hit Gordon like a blessing. Salvatore extends his hand. Thank you for that, he says. And thank you for creating a space where she can feel safe now. They shake hands. And in that gesture is the possibility of something new. Not forgiveness exactly. But the possibility of it. The opening toward it. Bianca tugs on her father's sleeve. Daddy, she says, can we come back next week? Salvatore looks at his daughter. She's smiling for the first time all evening. Not the polite smile she's learned to use when she's trying to disappear. But a real smile. A smile that says she's found something here, in this diner, with this waitress, with these strangers who became witnesses, that she didn't know she was missing. Yes, Salvatore says. We can come back. Elena, watching from across the room, feels something release in her chest. This was supposed to be a job. A paycheck. A way to survive while she figured out her life. But it's become something else. It's become a place where she can be herself. Where her language matters. Where her grandmother's voice lives on through her own. She makes a decision. Tomorrow, she'll call her mother. She'll ask if they can start speaking Sicilian at home again. She'll tell her mother about a man and his daughter and a room full of strangers who decided that love matters more than rules. The Navy veteran stands to leave. He approaches Salvatore one more time. What you did tonight, he says, what you taught that room, that's the bravery we need more of. Not the kind that starts wars. The kind that starts conversations. The kind that brings people home to themselves. He leaves a generous tip on the counter. And as he walks out, he's already thinking about calling his own daughter. About asking her to teach him Tagalog. About reversing the silence that was inflicted on him. The diner settles into a new rhythm. The lights are the same. The booths are the same. The coffee tastes the same. But everything has changed. Because one waitress spoke in her grandmother's language. Because one father decided his grief was worth sharing. Because one child asked a question that no one had dared to ask before. And because a room full of strangers decided that some things matter more than policy. When Salvatore and Bianca walk out of Marcus's waterfront diner at 8:23 p.m., the cold Connecticut air hits them like a reminder of the world outside this small sacred space. But something is different now. The cold doesn't feel like isolation. It feels like clarity. Bianca reaches up and holds her father's hand, not out of fear this time, but out of connection. She's been learning her mother's language for 3 hours, and already it feels like Maria is walking beside them. As they move through the parking lot toward their car, a 2008 Honda Civic that's held together with duct tape and hope, Salvatore thinks about the words his wife used to say. Words carry the people we love. Maria believed that language was resurrection. That speaking someone's words meant they weren't truly gone. That every time Bianca said her mother's name in Sicilian, Maria became alive again. For 3 years, Salvatore tried to make his wife disappear by erasing her language. And in those 3 years, he almost erased his daughter too. But tonight, in a diner that smells like coffee and possibility, his daughter asked to learn. And he answered. And 17 strangers witnessed it and understood that they'd been erased too. That they'd been trying to resurrect people for years. Bianca looks up at her father as they reach the car. Daddy, she says, will you teach me more tomorrow? Every day, he promises. Every single day for the rest of your life. She nods seriously. And we'll come back to the diner, she asks. Yes, he says. We'll go back. Because that's where it happened. That's where his daughter became brave enough to say her mother's name out loud. That's where Elena gave them permission to exist. That's where a room full of strangers decided that compassion was more important than comfort. They drive through the cold Connecticut night. And in the silence of the car, Salvatore speaks to his daughter in the language her mother loved. He tells her stories about Maria. About the village where her mother was born. About the strength that runs through their bloodline. About women who survived loss by speaking it into existence. Bianca falls asleep to the sound of her father's voice. And when she does, she dreams in Sicilian. 3 states away, Elena sits in her apartment and opens the language journal her grandmother left her. She's been carrying it for 2 years, unable to look at it because it hurt too much. But tonight, she reads her grandmother's handwriting, phrases written in careful script, words she wanted Elena to remember. Elena picks up her phone and calls her mother. We're going to start speaking Sicilian again, she says. Not sometimes. Every day. Her mother cries. Because that's what happens when someone breaks the silence. It echoes. It spreads. It gives other people permission to stop being quiet. In his back office, Gordon pulls out his phone. He finds his sister's contact. He hasn't called her in 5 years. There was an argument about something stupid, and then there was silence, and then the silence became permanent. But tonight, he remembers his mother's voice. He remembers the version of himself that existed before he decided to become his father. He calls his sister. I'm sorry, he says when she answers. I'm sorry for so many things. I'm sorry I let Mom become small. I'm sorry I helped erase her. And I'm sorry I let you become a stranger. His sister doesn't say anything at first. Then, teach me Sicilian. Teach me what she spoke. Teach me what we lost. And in that moment, another cycle breaks. The question that lingers, the question that haunts the diner and follows Salvatore home and sits in Elena's chest and cracks open something in Gordon that can never fully close again, is this. How many families are still silent? How many children are growing up without the voices of people they love because someone taught them that their language was inconvenient? That their grief was unprofessional? That who they are is something to apologize for? How many people are walking through this world half-erased, waiting for one moment when someone gives them permission to speak? Bianca sleeps in the back seat, dreaming her mother's words. Salvatore drives through the night toward a new life, one where his daughter will grow up knowing exactly where she comes from. Knowing that her mother's voice is worth keeping alive. Knowing that love has a language, and sometimes that language is the only thing that matters. And as his car disappears into the darkness, one final question remains, the one that drives everything that comes next. When Bianca opens her eyes tomorrow, will she be ready for what her father has promised to teach her? Or will the outside world try to make her quiet again,